Hey guys, thank you for listening to the podcast and supporting what we are trying to do. I do have a favor to ask. If you could help keep this podcast going, please head over to Patreon, support over there under Daddy Issues AFD. I went through the same bullshit, so I understand how it goes, and now I'm really trying to help others. I do all this on my free time and I'm trying to keep it going. I believe it's helping out dads out there. If you can jump over and support on Patreon, that would be a huge help. It's under Daddy Issues AFD. Thank you guys.
Imagine waking up, never coming home again. And basically in the span of, 24 hours, you go from, having what is viewed as the perfect life to now all of a sudden you have civil protection order against you, a divorce against you, and now you're facing a criminal charge that could impact the rest of your life.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Daddy Issues. Today we got on Ryan. He's going to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about his story.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you having me again, and looking forward to sharing my story, man. My name is Ryan. Got divorced back in 2019, but obviously still dealing with some of the trauma and things that come along with the marriage and being divorced with kids. So, I got found out that my spouse at the time was having an affair, and it was kind of man, as anyone can probably relate, when you find out your spouse is having extramarital affair, it can be very like a knife in the stomach. It's a punch to the gut, and I always kind of told myself, and even had these jokingly conversations with her, that it was one thing that I could probably never get over, was infidelity in a marriage. So it was always kind of like an inside joke, like, hey, if that ever happens, you probably shouldn't talk about divorce and when you are married, but at the same time, it's like, if you ever did that, or that ever happened, it would definitely be a deal breaker for me. As a kid growing up, that was, what I witnessed from my own father as well. And it was something that I kind of prided myself on, that was something that I would never do, and I would never hope that my spouse would do. So yeah, I found out that there was an infidelity, confronted her on it. And I don't know how big and how long into the weeds we want to get with this, but when I confronted her on it, it turned into, argumentative, clearly. And she accused me of hitting her, which then kind of opened up another can of worms for what was about to happen over the next year of my life. And
And this is all before you guys are divorced, like right when this happened, you accused her, and then
yeah. So I even found out. So basically, I was at work, and you had this intuition. I've been kind of feeling it for quite some time, that there was probably something going on. Just couldn't really figure it out what was going on. And there was some cracks in our marriage, and really, I guess I was just kind of didn't want to accept it, or just kind of blind to it all. And I ended up going, finding out that through some messages that, saw in her messages, that she was exchanging messages, and there was conversations being had, and that's how I found out. And so when I confronted her on it, I didn't go home that night. I spent the night somewhere else. Confronted her the next morning. We were still married, and obviously,
was she asking where you were, or because you didn't say anything, like you just didn't come home?
no, like she knew that I knew, because when I logged into the messages, I actually responded, or was communicating with the other person she was having relationships with, as myself. And and so she immediately knew that I knew, because clearly I was communicating. So it was through a social media platform. So I logged in, I knew her password, saw these messages. My heart sank. Couldn't believe it. And so basically, when I started responding or communicating like I was her, just to kind of see what the conversation would look like, she immediately saw them, and then basically deleted all the messages.
Jesus.
And so, you know, I uh, I didn't really have anyone to turn to. I had a fractured relationship with my own family, unfortunately. I wasn't from this area, so I didn't really have a whole lot of people that I could really turn to here. So the only person I felt comfortable with at the time to meet with was our pastor, and obviously, and actually not obviously, but was my brother-in-law at the time, because I felt he was somebody I could trust, and kind of knew what I was probably going to be dealing with. And so I actually spent the night with my brother-in-law that evening. And so went over to his house. Never talked to my wife at the time for that entire evening. She sent me some messages. Are you going to come home? We need to talk about this. And I just, yeah, I wasn't in the headspace to really have that conversation. So I went home the next morning, confronted her on it, and like I said, long story short, she falsely accused me of hitting her. And so, unfortunately, in today's society, um, uh, when there's a domestic violence call, somebody's getting arrested. And it's unfortunate. I respect and understand the police officer situation, but at the same time, it made me feel like that our justice system is really a guilty until proven innocent, not necessarily innocent until proven guilty. So it's, you're already behind the eight ball. So, whether, I'm all about, traditional, men, as far as being providers, the strong, and the women being kind of the nurturing, that's just kind of, in my aspect, kind of what I witnessed and kind of always kind of believed in, kind of that old school method. And and so automatically I feel like when you get those kind of accusations that are thrown around out there, us men are kind of already behind the eight ball, because we're already looked at as strong, or somebody that's more disciplined, or more angry or whatever. So that really set a domino effect of a lot of things that were about to transpire over the course of the next year.
And how many kids do you guys have together?
Three.
So three kids in the middle
Yeah.
of this. She accuses you of that. Are you guys now separated? Like, are you moved out, or are you guys still living together? How does that work?
Well, so so when I got accused of that, I immediately was thrown in jail for the weekend.
Oh, damn.
And so by the time I was able to get out of jail, she had already lawyered up, and basically was 3 or 4 days ahead of me.
So she didn't even feel bad about that. You would think, like, you know what I mean? Like, I understand people say shit, at the heat of the moment, but for you to spend the weekend in jail and she has no emotion at all of that, and she's the one who did this whole situation. That is crazy.
Yeah. So I mean, it was, there was a whole you know theory of how I kind of ended up in the whole weekend, because at the time of what happened, there was supposedly that if I would have gotten to the so I ended up going to a local station, which then transferred me to a different station to put me in for the whole weekend. But that place told me, no, you're not supposed to be here. You need to go to a different holding cell, basically. So I had to get shipped 30 minutes elsewhere. So I was literally in a police car for like 2 hours,
Wow.
going back and forth. And what I was originally told, that if I could have made it to the last stop that I was at by a certain time, I think by like 12 o'clock on that Saturday, I could have saw a judge, posted bail, posted bond, and gotten out. However, uh, because of the timing of it all, I didn't get there till almost 1 o'clock, and basically was stuck in jail for 3 days. And so I couldn't do anything, and was literally behind the eight ball with everything. So, so yeah, it was a process. And so as soon as I get out of jail, it was kind of like defense mode, because you've got to figure out real quick what you're doing, because by the time I got out of jail, within a day or two, I was slapped with not only divorce papers, but I think within the 24-hour span of those divorce papers, I was also slapped with a civil protection order.
Wow.
And so, it was just like in a span of one day. Imagine waking up one day on and you know, kiss your kids goodbye, you say goodbye to your wife. You know, I wasn't really expecting to not come home that weekend. Imagine waking up never coming home again. And basically in the span of, 24 hours, you go from, having what is viewed as the perfect life to now all of a sudden you have civil protection order against you, a divorce against you, and now you're facing a criminal charge that could impact the rest of your life.
And that is different from the other story. Sorry for cutting you off. That's the quickest out of all the stories I've heard, that is the quickest, from married, just like you were saying, to then divorced, and then also with other court things that you have to deal with. I mean, that's over a weekend.
Yeah, it was literally over a weekend, and it was within, again, days. And so, when I get out of jail, it's again, I'm trying to scramble to find. All right, well, I've got to find an attorney real quick for the first thing. The first matter was the criminal issue and the civil issue, and the reason why. And so, just from a standpoint, so everyone's clear, is that when you get slapped with a domestic violence charge with kids, or you do have kids with your spouse. The civil protection order, there's automatically a temporary restraining order for that domestic violence allegation, um, against just the person that accuses you of that. There is no protection order against the kids, though. Now, people will say, well, then how do you get to see the kids if you can't talk or go within a certain distance of the spouse? I mean, that's still possible. You could make arrangements through a third party to see your kids. However, the reason the civil protection order was put into place was to keep me from the kids. And so I went 55 days, roughly, from even seeing my kids. So, again, woke up one day, by the time I got out of court or out of jail, within a couple of days, again, divorce, civil protection order, or divorce papers were served, and criminal charges obviously were still pending based off the allegation.
And how confused are your kids? They don't get to see you just randomly for 2 months almost. I mean, that's
That's a
unbelievable.
great question. I couldn't not only could I not see them, I couldn't even talk to them.
Wow.
So I couldn't attend any events, if they had any at school. I couldn't attend any games. Now, ironically, that was right when, would have been end of 2019. So it was right before, COVID kind of shut the world down. But, still, it went from, I missed two birthdays during that time frame, and the start of school. So I didn't even see them until, well, probably would have been, yeah, I mean, school had already been in session for 3 or 4 weeks. So any sort of things leading up to that, or anything, I missed.
It's so frustrating. I don't even know how I would just be filled with so much anger because it's like the system's so broken to put you through that just on an allegation, to
Hmm.
not being able to see or eat. I don't think people understand you can't even talk to your kid. You can't for 2 months.
Hmm.
I mean, oh my
Yeah,
God.
and that's what's wild. And again, that's why, like, like you advocate, and you're trying to help, men, and just share their stories, because it's, I don't know if you had noticed, and not to drop this in there, but that's why I started a website called oneunsilencedvoice.com, because it's a way for, I'm one voice, you're one voice, but with enough of us banding together, it allows us the opportunity to create change, let our voices be heard, because the family court system has not changed in 50, 60, 70, 80 years,
Right.
if at all. I mean, we're starting to see a little bit more where there's, you know, there more and more studies are coming out, and I'm sure these as much as anyone else, that that men being part of kids' lives is just as important, if not, I hate to say more important, but it's very, there's a lot of studies behind it, of what men being part of their children's lives versus just a mother, or the mother being primarily part of the kids' lives, and the father's like a weekend warrior, every other weekend warrior, that the statistics of how negatively impactful that can have on kids is
Mhm.
through the roof. And so, that's why I want to help, share my story, help other people, just because I, trust me, I was at rock bottom, and I can understand why men get frustrated, why they, abandon their kids potentially, not because they do it purposely, because they feel like they have no chance, they have no hope. and they just kind of run away from the problem rather than trying to take it on. And a lot of factors play into that, but man, I can tell you what, it can be very frustrating, can be very.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole reason I started the podcast. I got pushed to my limit and I was so frustrated with the system, with everything, and then I just started talking and it was like therapy for me because I was releasing my story, but I can only imagine for you too. It's like you're like how can I help other people, going through whatever I went through, and you're like boom, let me do a shirt company. And yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I just launched it, and it's, it's, again, it's something simple just to create, hey, excuse me, amplify your impact, in one unsilenced voice. And it just uses that conversation piece to tell your story. If you think about how many people get divorced, I mean, over 50% of the United States, I believe, is getting a divorce. So it impacts half the United States at least. And not, that's not counting obviously other countries that are impacted by this and what that may be. But, we know it's a big audience. We know it can be a great conversation piece, but another thing is just the mental health aspect of it that you already mentioned. Is that when I remember I went again. I woke up, and within 3 days, I've got to figure out where am I going to live, what I'm going to do. We didn't even touch on the fact that I ended up getting put on administrative leave from my job, and which eventually ended up losing my job because of these allegations.
Oh,
And so
because of the allegations.
because of the
Wow.
allegations, I ended up losing my job over within a matter of a month. They put me on administrative leave, and then within 30 days, I was no longer employed. And so, because unfortunately, the court system, rightfully so, I guess can take their time, but my court case didn't get settled for the domestic violence for nearly 9 months.
Yeah. Now, was part of that due to COVID? Because that's mine was a simple custody custody case. I was never married, but it took 6 years. We're still in court, but
Oh my
part of
goodness,
it was
man.
because of COVID. But
Yeah,
yeah.
well, mine happened in 2019, and then so the only thing I got pushed back was my divorce settlement got handled in February. We signed the papers, everything went into effect, but because of COVID, that was right when it happened. It actually got pushed back until the beginning of May to actually go in front of a judge or do a Zoom call with the judge. So our divorce got settled about a year later, from the initial start of this whole domino effect. My criminal aspect got settled about 2 weeks or 3 weeks before um, my ex-wife and I settled on our divorce. So roughly mid-February was when the domestic violence situation was resolved, and then the divorce was a few weeks later.
And then how is that paying two separate attorneys? I assume
I had four.
for
I had
at the same
well,
time.
technically, I had four different cases with three different attorneys. So I had employment attorneys, I had a civil attorney, and also the civil attorney was also my criminal attorney, and I had a divorce attorney.
What are they telling you? They must be like, this is friggin' unbelievable.
Well,
I mean, they're making money, so they probably don't care. But that's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. They were, they all kind of worked together to a certain aspect. Um, a lot of it hinged from the domestic violence aspect of it was to, you know, um, really a lot of things hinge from that because theoretically, if I'm charged with that or found guilty of that, that really hurts me in a lot of aspects, not only just short term but long term. But yeah, they all worked together for the most part. They communicated back and forth. It was, working with if I had something over here that on the divorce side that was impactful on the criminal side or civil side, that was, we would go back and forth with that information. But yeah, it was a lot, and I mean it was just lengthy emails, conversations, and a lot of money racked up for sure.
Yeah. And then, so you also said that you could have taken a plea deal, but you decided not to. Is that because you knew you obviously were innocent, so you're not going to take a plea?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, obviously that's one thing that and again, today's society, people will sit there and whether you get proven innocent or not, will still believe one party or the other. That's kind of an aura that's always there, and that's always that's obviously something that still kind of follows me around. Is that allegation to certain people that say, "Oh my gosh, that's the guy," and his ex-wife said this and, or whatever. But at the same time, it's like, I was so adamant that I didn't do what you said I did. One, from my aspect, it was physically impossible, but at the same time, it was, this didn't happen. I ended up taking a lie detector test and, off the recommendation of my attorney, and passed the lie detector test. And I didn't know this. And so it's not like I go into these things, pre-planned. I mean, yeah, I took a lie detector test that was, imagine getting, what you see on TV, your fingers are all, things all over them and you're strapped around your chest. I mean, you've got all these things kind of monitoring your blood pressure and your heart rate. And they ask you simple questions like, just to get a baseline of, truth, is if you're looking at, your wall and it's blue, is the wall blue? Yes. And so they try to find these areas of, are you going to lie about something simple like that? Or, you know, um, just to kind of get that baseline. And they take about 4.5 hours long.
Oh, wow.
And so I was in there for, roughly 4.5 hours. And it was just question after question. It was, multiple times they asked the same question. And I was adamant to say, hey, listen, I didn't do this. And so actually, the prosecution offered me 4 different plea deals during this process, and I turned them all down. And basically, they started at, the highest misdemeanor, disorderly conduct from a domestic violence charge, which, again, it was the risk I was willing to take because domestic violence, at least in the state of Ohio, will stay on your record for your entire life.
Mm.
And there is, so when you do a background check, even though it was a domestic violence misdemeanor, I couldn't even get that expunged down the road. That's on your record forever. And so I said, you know what? I'm willing to take that risk because I didn't do this. I stand firm in who I am as a person. I've always been this way. I've always told the truth. And, even one of the things, just to kind of sidebar here, one of the things that I remember my ex-wife's telling our pastor in a conversation one time was that one thing that she did not like about me was the fact that I could always tell the truth and I could never lie. Okay, well, that's something you don't like about me, but to me, it seems like a pretty positive thing.
Right, right.
And so
I had to sit there and I was like, did he just say?
yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways, I remember just saying, hey, listen, I stand firm on my character and who I am. And, I still feel like I've got to constantly defend my character and who I am. Um, for whatever, for being a guy or whatever the case may be. But I was adamant to say, listen, I didn't do this. I'll take it to trial. And I firmly believe that, um, that I was going to be found not guilty because of, my character and who I was. And, and just basically, could prove that I didn't do that. So, I had 3 or 4 different, four plea deals because we started out as a misdemeanor, whatever the highest one is. I don't know if it's 4 or 1 or whatever. So they went from a domestic violence and I said, hey, right before we go in for our pretrial, here's your first, here's basically your offer. And it was, a couple $1,000 fine and a disorderly conduct, stay on your record for a year. And my attorney was like, you can get it expunged. Good deal. And I said, yeah, it's not good enough. And I want to take it to trial. So, we get to the courthouse, he walks in, said, I never went in front of a judge. And basically the judge says, or that my attorney tells him what I want to take it to trial. Prosecution, from my understanding, says, hey, we'll do another pretrial date, which means basically they want to continue to gather more evidence or, do what they need to do, which was really them setting up a way for them to potentially offer me another plea deal. Because even though I accept a plea deal, I'm basically admitting to guilt.
Right.
And obviously to the prosecution, that's a win for them. And so obviously prosecutors don't want to lose, or anyone doesn't want to lose. So they're looking for a way to say, hey, we at least got him to settle or get this, win under our belt, and we can move on to the next one. So, a month goes by for the next pre-trial. They offer me another plea deal. And this time it was a little bit lower, misdemeanor, whatever, and a smaller fine. I said, nope, not taking it. And same thing. So do the same, Groundhog Day all over again. Month goes by, another pretrial date gets set, and attorney calls me a few days before and says, "Hey, we've got another plea deal on the table, and it's the lowest, disorderly conduct you can have. They're offering you a speeding ticket fine, basically, of $150 or $100, and I can guarantee we'll get it expunged off your record like it never happened."
And it's so tough because it's so easy just to be like, all right, fine, I'll just take it just so we can just so we can be done with this shit. But you didn't do it, and you're like, nope. You know what I mean? I'll go all the way to trial, even if it gets me, even if they find me guilty.
Yeah, that's exactly what I said. And I remember sitting there, and I looked at my attorney, and I just said, you told me you were really good, and I just I can't accept something that I know that I did not do. And he says, "Well, it's going to cost you a lot more money if we take this to trial." And I said, "Well, that's the risk I'm willing to take, because I'm gonna die on this sort of my character, and
Yeah.
truly take this to the whole length. I told you from day one I didn't do it. I took the lie detector test. I proved I didn't do it. I don't know what else you want me to do. I know that's a he said, she said for the most part, because there's no other witnesses there. But at the same time, like, I've done everything that I could to show that this didn't happen." And so he goes into the courtroom, and with the prosecution, and he says, "Hey, we're going to go right in front of the judge right now. They're actually going to dismiss the case." And so I said, "What do you mean dismiss? Like, like this is over?" He's like, "They actually, there are no plea deals. They're actually dismissing this case." And so we get in front of the judge, and he says to me, or prosecution says, "Hey, we're going to dismiss this case. What is it, without prejudice, which means they can't come back on me ever again." So the charge is gone. And then the judge even looks at everyone, and pretty much says, "Well, because we've wasted basically the courthouse's time with this, and you've now dismissed this case, we're also going to expunge this man's record of the arrest like it never happened."
Oh,
And
nice.
so I look at it from a standpoint of, for encouragement to men out there that, stand firm in your beliefs, stand firm in what you do, and stand firm in who you are, because I firmly believe that if you have the capability or the ability to see it through, and you are truly fighting a battle that, may feel like an uphill battle, to stand firm in that truth. And that's what I did. And that's what I, told myself I was going to do, even though it cost me a lot of money and it cost me a lot of time and a lot of stress. I felt that it's something I had to do. And that's what I did.
Yeah. And then obviously she didn't get in trouble for any of this for false allegations or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not here to sit here and try to, again, bash her per se.
Yeah.
Um, she had her stance. I had my stance. Um, you know, she can sit there and say what she wants to say. I can sit here and say what I want to say. But I was able to put forth at least evidence to show that this didn't happen. Um, I'm not going to sit here, and try to sit and push the narrative that she should be accused of anything. I do think that kind of stuff happens in our society, and it's come out that kind of stuff has happened. But nothing happened with her from a standpoint of saying, "Hey, did this really happen?" And I guess in theory, they probably couldn't prove her story or collaborate with her story one way or the other. So,
Right.
it worked out. This, theoretically, the system did work out to my benefit, I guess you would say. But still, you know, it took 9 months to get to that point, and it was truly, I was viewed as I'm guilty that entire 9 months until I was able to get to that final point. So
Yeah.
that's where I have a hard time with our system, because it isn't really you're innocent until proven guilty. It's today's social media, today's, whatever it is, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. I mean, stuff spreads like wildfire. And you can be innocent in a court of law but be guilty by the court, by public opinion.
Hmm.
So I think that's just as bad, if anything else, because you you see it all the time where people prove their innocence or prove whatever, or prove beyond a reasonable doubt that somebody is guilty. But then on the flip side, you got people in the court of public opinion that basically, you could be guilty in their eyes or not guilty in their eyes. And you're constantly facing that in society.
Yeah. Yep. What happened after that with your kids? Like, do you have 50-50 now, or what's the schedule look like?
Yeah. So when we first went to court, we actually settled with everything for the most part. I mean, like most things, you always battle about what money, kids, and assets and kids, and so with the kids aspect, I asked for 50-50. I did get 50-50. We had a 2-2-2-2-3 split, so 2 days on, 2 days off, 3-day weekend, and then flip flop the following week. Rotating holidays and that kind of stuff. So everything was going pretty good, and even to that aspect, I actually still ended up paying some child support, which I'm not necessarily against paying child support, but I was still struggling with paying child support when you have a 50-50 shared parenting plan.
Right.
To me, it didn't make sense, but at the time, that's what I was advised to do was, you're going to pay child support whether you want to or not. And really, it doesn't matter how much you have the kids. And I literally had the kids 50% overnight stays. So it didn't make sense that I still had to pay child support. So that was something that always kind of bothered me for a little while. And then, so everything was fairly decent for a couple years until about a year and a half ago, I decided to have my child support reviewed, given the amount of overnight stays that I had. My understanding that I could have been overpaying. And so I just wanted a review. And when I did that, it opened up another can of worms of, I'm not a fit father. I, do all these other things. And so all of a sudden it basically started another, court battle basically that we just got resolved about a year ago. But I do think that it's kind of a never ending progress. I want to say there's an end in sight, but I also believe that, it could end itself back in court just because, as a parent, I want to have access to my kids. I want to be
Mhm.
able to see my kids as much as I can. I've done everything I can to be involved. And it's sad that you constantly have to go into the court system because of a he said, she said, just to be able to see your kids a certain amount of times.
Yeah. And you got remarried pretty fast, or well,
Yeah.
from your divorce to you getting remarried. Was there any was she upset about that you moved on? How did that play
Yeah.
out?
It's hard to answer that question because she, my ex-wife and I don't really communicate that much to begin with and don't really communicate. It's very limited. But at the same time, um, there was, I look at it from a standpoint is that I didn't really start this domino effect or domino fall of what transpired and what went down. Um, so if she's mad or upset that I got remarried or whatever that may be, like to me, there's that's not relevant and it shouldn't be relevant in the situation. Is she mad or upset? I can't answer that question. But I know that it, through third parties that there is some sort of dislike there because I have moved on or because I am remarried or whatever the case may be. Do I think that that it has anything to do with wanting to be with me per se? Probably not. But I think it's more of, I am happy. I found somebody that basically can that does provide for me in the ways that I want, and vice versa. And we like a lot of the same things, so that we're equally yoked in a lot of ways. Um, and so what made it crazy, and to some people is like, why'd you move on so fast? I look at it, I didn't talk to her until theoretically, even though my divorce was final in May, our first time we ever conversed, um, or actually I say May from a standpoint of the court system, but earlier I said we signed those papers in February. I didn't actually physically communicate with her until mid-April. And so, I was already almost a year from waking up one day and never going home. So there was no reconciliation. There was no kind of this thing being played out with my ex-wife. I was basically woke up and then moved out,
Yeah.
instantaneously. And so I was out on my own for a while. Was renting, living with somebody for about 4 months, and then ended up getting my own place for about a year and a half. Well, before I met her, 8, 9 months later, and then we continued to live there for another year or so until we built a house together. But the crazy part about it is that it was just kind of fate how that brought me and my ex-wife together. Um, and I'm a big. I mean, I worked in ministry before, so like I came to Christ later in life, and I don't mean to go down this tangent here, but I do believe in fate, and I do believe in how God works in people's lives, and God exposes certain things and allows you to go through certain trials and tribulations to bring you closer to Him. But it was a fate thing, and for her and I to come connected because the girl I'm married to now, her and I went to high school together,
Mm.
and we both were married. We both went through some pretty traumatic relationships, and with my divorce and everything that was going on at the same time that I was going through that, she was going through a divorce. And so, we had followed each other on social media. There was never any interaction. I can swear on the Bible that I never liked a comment, liked a post, liked a picture or anything. We were just friends. We grew up together. We went to high school together,
And now
and
you, because you live in Ohio now, but where are you? Where did you guys go to high school?
small little town in southern Ohio. So it's
Oh,
called,
okay. So same state, but
yeah,
different.
same,
Okay, gotcha.
yeah, same state. Um, and she was living roughly a couple hours away. But we just stayed connected. And it was just one of those random things and fate things that we just stayed connected. I remember even when before I got married and she got married, we were like 24 years old. So I'm 40 years old now. But so it's been 16, 17 years ago. The typical right before Thanksgiving, uh, uh, the day before Thanksgiving, everyone gets together at your hometown and everyone gets together because you're there with family. So all your friends get together, and at least something that we do here in Ohio. So we're out this local bar, and I run into her. And so, obviously I'm fresh out of college. She's just out of college, and we exchanged numbers. We communicated, we talked, but she was living 3 hours away from where I was living. We never talked. I never called her. She never called me, never text, never did nothing. This was 17 years ago. So fast forward, say 37 years old when we start, or 36, 37 when we started connecting again. I sent her a message randomly because I noticed that she wasn't posting pictures with her husband. I noticed that she wasn't wearing her wedding ring. And so I thought, I wonder what she's up to. So I just happened to randomly message her. And she texted me her number or messaged me her number, and I text her, and she still had my number saved.
Oh,
And
wow.
we have never exchanged numbers and you know messages in 17, 18 years. So it was kind of a God thing and a fate thing, to kind of bring us together. And I think we both needed each other at that time, and we still need each other, because of what we were going through, with divorce and issues and struggles. And so, it's been a blessing for me. Um, and hopefully it's been a blessing for her too.
That's awesome. If you could give some advice to other dads out there, other guys out there, what would it be?
Stay firm in your belief and and do everything you can to be as active with your kid as you can. I know it's hard. Trust me, I'm still like yourself, Dan. I know you said you're still dealing with stuff. Obviously, it's pretty easy when you go through a divorce from potentially and not have kids. But when you have kids, divorce can be very ugly. And unfortunately, the kids are the ones that get impacted. The best advice I could give somebody is just continue to show your kids love. And I know how difficult that can feel at times, knowing, a father's love and a mother's love can be two different things. And they both mean the same thing, but they can come across as two different things just because of how men are wired, because of how women are wired, and the providing and and the hunting as a man versus the nurturing and kind of caring and loving. So they come across two different ways, but continue to be true to yourself and continue to love. And if I could, the best thing I could ever tell a dad is, as difficult as it can be, stay as close as you can to your kids. And what I mean by that, and I know this is probably something you wanted me to wrap up pretty quickly, but this hits home for me because when I was a kid, around 12, 13 years old, my parents got divorced. And so my oldest is around the age that I was when my parents got divorced. And so it's almost like I'm living deja vu, except obviously roles are reversed. I'm not the kid, obviously, I'm the parent. And I remember the struggles of, now I'm not going to get into the debate of who was right and wrong with my parents, but when I know that it was a very ugly divorce. I remember as a kid being in courtrooms multiple times because of custody disputes, of child support disputes, and all these different things.
They brought the kids into it back then. Wow.
Yeah. And so, I always told myself I was never going to be in that. I never wanted to be in a situation, which is why I never wanted to get divorced from, but infidelity was one thing I always would struggle with. But I always wondered why, when my parents got divorced, like why it had to be that difficult. Well, long story short, my father ended up leaving when I was around 13, 14 years old, and I never saw him again until I was 29.
Wow.
And so I don't know the real reason as to why. I'll never get the truth from either probably my own mother or my father, who has now passed away, why they who was in the fault, what the real reason was, why he left. He's told me one thing, I've heard one thing from my mother, but at the end of the day, that's what makes it hard as a kid, is because I felt like I was being forced to choose.
Hmm.
And, I don't want my kids to feel that same thing. I don't want them to be forced to choose something. But I also want to do everything in my power to make sure that I can be impactful and to be part of their lives. And so, something that's always sat with me, I remember. So, fast forward, when I said I was 29 to seeing my dad and going 16, 17 years, or 16, 15 years without ever seeing him, I actually reached out to him and hunted him down and found him. He was literally living all across the other side of the country, of the United States, out in New Mexico. Um, and I actually remember having the birth of my first child. And in my mind, I'm thinking, um, how can a man ever abandon his kids? I just found that difficult, and for me to understand, and for me to kind of wrap my mind around that. And so I set off to find my father and reconnect with him and salvage a relationship that was actually really there. And, he, we were able to reconnect and see each other a few times, and try to forge a relationship. Now, it wasn't probably a traditional father son kind of relationship, because there were so many things that he missed that I missed, and that it was just kind of hard to kind of forge that relationship because you just wasn't there. Um, but the best advice I can give somebody is, despite how difficult it can feel, how big the struggle may be, like, stay as close as your kids as you can. Don't let the difficulties force you, or convince you, or tell you that you just need to go move away to make it easier, or to give up to make it easier, and just be that, every other weekend or once a week kind of father. Um, I'm doing everything in my power, to stay as close as I can, and I literally mean close. Me and my wife built a house, uh, 2.5 miles away from my old house. That's how close I want to stay. And so, I think that those sort of actions and those sort of things, it may be difficult because as kids get older, we know that hormones change and lifestyles change, and what they want to do changes. But as they get old, I think they'll notice that kind of stuff. Like, hey, dad didn't leave me. Dad, he was 3 miles away. And now when he's old, when kids are old enough to drive, whether or not they want to come visit, their mom or their dad, is up to them, I guess, from a certain extent, because they have a little bit of flexibility. But, my goal is to stay as close as I can. And at least until they graduate high school, until they can make their own decisions, and maybe I'll look at relocating and doing something else. But, I'm pretty firm and adamant to stay as close as I can. physically, as close as I can mentally to them, so that they don't have to go through the same thing that I went through, which is a lot of questions as you get older. Is why did Dad leave me? Why was Dad? Even if I was an active father from a phone call standpoint, I don't want to be 300 miles away or a state over. I want to be close enough to where they can one day ride a bike close enough to me, or jump in the car and come see me within 5 minutes. Um, I don't want them to grow up with questions like I did for nearly half their, majority of their adulthood, saying, why did Dad leave me?
And
And
then
then
sometimes those they never get answered.
they never get answered. They're still not
Yeah.
answered to this day.
Right.
I'm 40 and I still don't feel like I've got those answers. I don't have clarity, and I still struggle with some of those, things as from a child. And I know that's why you call it daddy issues. I mean, I've got those issues because I don't have those answers or clarity, because I don't know what the truth really was, and I'll never find that out.
It's
Yeah,
tough. I think it's tough for boys too when your dad leaves and you're like, why? You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like, yeah.
yeah. And that's I hope that and that's the thing, is that I never really want to come across as somebody that is trying to pull them from their mother. I truly do, and I honestly wish the court system would step in more often to force parents to um, proactively figure out ways to get along. Not
Hmm.
not force them to. When I say force them, I know that they have certain apps out there that communicate through. Like that's not forcing them to do anything. You can communicate, whether it's through these apps that the court systems use or text messaging or email. But I mean, if there are true issues that are rearing its head, whether it's, and maybe I'm in the wrong with certain things. Possibly, I'm not sitting there saying that I am perfect, but I know that relationships are not 50-50. They're 100-100. Like, if you're not giving 100% of you, and I'm not, and I'm not giving you 100%, like, the relationship's not going to work. So I wish the court system would step in more often to force parents to be active and communicating better.
It's so beneficial to the children when you do
Ex-
that, or when you
Exactly.
can do that. Yeah.
And if you look at what's in documentation of the court system, I mean, it literally says in there, like, parents to communicate, parents to do this, and parents to do that. Like, and, many people will say, well, we do communicate on as needed and what's needed, and doctor's appointments or whatever. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about true communication. I mean, there are things that I have a difference of opinion on. Doesn't make me right necessarily all the time, doesn't make her wrong, or vice versa. But the court system needs to step in, I think, to force some. There's got to be some. There's a fix. It's broken somewhere, and I don't have all the answers to it, but there's a clear breakdown, and it only impacts the kids. And for people like yourself and people like me, I think we're the experts that should come in and fix these, because you and I both grew up in broken homes. We've seen this as kids, and here we are. I don't know how old you are, Dan, but I just said I'm 40, but at the same time,
37. Yeah.
37, you're around the same age as me. We're still dealing with these issues,
Yep.
and the cycle's not being broken. And here we are, and it's the same stuff that you went through as a kid and I went through as a kid, and we're facing it 30 years later. So to me, that's a problem. There's nothing being done about it. And and I hate to say that I'm not relying on government. I'm just saying that there needs to be some sort of mandate or some sort of fix to resolve these problems, because if the court system truly cares, which they say that they do, if you look at the documents, we're doing what's in the best interest of the kids. Well, what's in the best interest of the kids? Statistics show you that having both parents present, specifically a father, is going to have a more dramatic impact on that kid's life than if the father is removed. I mean, I've wrote some of these down, not for this particular call, but I use them all the time. But uh, did you know that 70% of prison inmates incarcerated for long-term sentences grew up in broken homes? I mean, think about that. 79% of suicides in society are men, and divorced men are 9 times more likely to commit suicide. So now it's impacting you and I. You've got 21% of kids are raised without fathers, some as high as 40%, as some studies show. And then you have 90% of divorced mothers have custody. Children with divorced parents are twice as likely to commit suicide. So we have some major, major statistics that show the impact of divorce, the impact of broken homes, and the impact of removal of the father in the home and how that can play in a kid's life. And I just saw something the other day that even there's studies that show that the kids that are raised primarily by the father versus primarily by the mother, the likely, like when they compare the father household compared to a non-broken home or a family that stays together, like that's almost identical statistics or of how those kids how they grow up.
Yeah, I think it's more discipline, but it's even the same with like the welfare system. It almost incentivizes women not to have the father in the home. But things like this podcast, things like your company, and your website, trying to hopefully bring this stuff to light, so eventually it can be changed. We can change the system, or a younger guy is going to jump into that office, that position, and he'll be able to change it. So the system's definitely broken for sure, and we have the statistics to back it all up. But it's like, why isn't anything being done yet?
Yeah, and it's that's a $1,000,000 question. I wish we could we'll never get the answer to. It's just whatever's hot on their political agenda. But unfortunately, these are one of those things that generally are not hot on the political agenda. But again, it impacts over 50% of the United States because
it's the future.
It's the future of your generation.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. I really appreciate that. I can't believe you made it out that quickly from where you were, because you got thrown in the dirt.
Yeah, it was a journey, and I'm sorry that I went on some tangents and probably elaborated too long on certain stories. But
good.
At the same time, man, it's I look at it from a story of trial, and a story of triumph, or triumph. It's one of those things where, again, I can understand and relate why men struggle and why men do certain things to themselves or to others because they don't feel like they have anything left. But I can tell you one thing, that is not the answer. That is not worth it. To just stay the course. It does get better, as difficult as it may seem. It can get better. It will get better. And don't get me wrong. Here I am 4 years removed from this, 5 years removed from this. I still struggle at times when it comes to what I'm dealing with or what's going on. It's not like it's not an uphill climb, easy uphill climb. And we have peaks and valleys to this every single day. Just like you have peaks and valleys to life. That's just part of life. But just stay active, keep your head up. One thing I always, as a youth football coach here in our community, I always tell the kids, when we have a bad day or, we lose a game or whatever the case may be, I always end it with saying, guess what's going to happen tomorrow? The sun's still going to rise. It's a new day. And so, be encouraged by that, because whatever happened today is now history. And, all we can look forward to is tomorrow. So, we have the ability to still make an impact and still help, because tomorrow's a brand new day and tomorrow's a fresh start.
Thank you so much. That was a great episode.
I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
You can't hold me down. You can't hold me down.